Hi, I'm Gwen Clearwater, and I'm one of the interviewers for the Nipigon Narrations that are taking place at the museum from the New Horizons. And I'm here today with Gwen Nyman, friend and colleague, and the topic today is 60 years ago that Gwen and I came to Nipigon to teach school. 60 years ago this month. Right, Gwen?
Oh, how I remember those days.
Gwen was one of those people recruited from England. So Gwen, I just want you to tell a little bit about why they recruited people from England and how you got to come here.
Well, first of all, I wasn't going to come to Canada. I had warm countries to go to, I was going to apply to. But there was a little ad in a newspaper in England. It was about 1/2 inch wide and 2 inches across in a column, saying teachers wanted for Nipigon, Ontario. We looked it up on the map and we decided it was on a big lake, so it would have a big beach and lots of going on. So here I am.
And you know what? When I looked at mine too, I thought, oh, it's a provincial park around there. There's going to be lots to do. Oh, disillusioned, eh?
Oh yeah. So it was a real shock when I got here. So I went via Toronto, and a girl in Toronto who was also English had met me on the boat, and she invited me to go there for 2 days. She said, where are you going? I said, Nipigon. Oh, she said, I've heard about Nipigon. All people know about Nipigon is it's got lots of churches and lots of bars on Main Street. So It was pretty close. Yeah, so.
But tell about when you got off the boat, because it's 60 years ago since the flood in Nipigon as well.
Oh, I was going to mention that.
Yes.
But when I first got off the boat, I had sent my trunk ahead with my belongings for 1 year, and I had $50 in my pocket. I got off the train, and all the way from Sault Ste. Marie to Nipigon, I thought, there's got to be cities on either side of these trees. It can't be nothing. I discovered like 6 months later, it is nothing but bush. I was really surprised, and bushed too by the end of the year. And I got off the train and stood on the platform. It was about 10 o'clock at night, it was dark, and there was nobody there to meet me. I had no idea where I was going, no addresses, nothing. It turns out Bob Matchett, who was on the school board at that time, had decided he would be the one to meet me, and he was stuck on the other side of the tracks and couldn't get to me. So there was the train sitting in the station, Bob Matchett on one side and me on the platform on the other. Finally came around, took me up to my landlady's house. And Glenda had already arrived here. She'll tell you about her house.
Yeah. I had come via train and bus from the Long Lac area, because I came by train from Toronto, and arrived in Nipigon. Again, you stand there and you're looking to see who's going to pick you up and take you somewhere. And I was fortunate that again, Bob Matchett and George O'Neill were both there and took me. I stayed at Dave Banning's house for the duration of the time there, and it was bed and breakfast. And I remember writing to Anita Wang, who was the secretary, and saying I wanted a room to sleep in and a room for an office or to work in. Well, you don't get those kinds of things, I found out. But I did enjoy staying with them because they had a young family, and there was lots of things to do there before we started school even.
So what a welcome Glenda had. Mine was entirely different. I had a tiny room upstairs in Mrs. Pontinen's house. It's like the Finn houses with the upstairs, and another teacher from England had arrived before me, Rosalind Rappaport, and she had taken one room and I had this little tiny room. I still to this day can't remember where I washed. I must have used a sauna in the basement, I'm not quite sure. And we had no way to prepare food, no way to heat water or have a cup of coffee. And so when we wanted any meals, first thing in the morning or last thing at night, we had to walk 1 block to George O'Neill, which was then Nipigon Public School, and go down in the basement, in the dark, down that dark hallway, to where they had a kitchen for the teachers to prepare their food. But my welcome, I went into the house and I was welcomed very much by Mrs. Pontinen and her daughter, Helen Lipinski. But there was another lady sitting at the table there, and she welcomed me with, "Why did you come here? We don't want English teachers here. Go home. Our children cannot learn in school because none of them understand you. Now I know my accent is really bad, so I kind of agree with her now I'm this age, but I didn't agree with her then. I was so upset and I went upstairs, I had a good cry. That was my first day.
But in that time when you came, we had the Peels. Midge and Tony were here teaching from England. Eva Achitois was here teaching from England, which was Eva Smith, right?
Yes.
When she came. And then Beryl Tumala came, Beryl Keep. She married Archie Tumala, so she was here. And then after you came, the Taylors.
The Taylors and Frida and Louise.
Oh, and Frida and Louise, right.
They were so short of teachers here that teachers were coming from England by the dozens, I think.
Yeah.
I was paid less than Canadian teachers too when I first arrived. I bet Glenna doesn't know this, do you?
I didn't remember that.
I was only paid $3,100 a year. I was paid $200 less because my experience had been in England and it wasn't good enough for Canada, I guess. So I had to work till I was on maximum salary about 5 years before I caught up to everybody in the school.
But I was only $3,500, so I wasn't
Yeah.
that much more than Gwen. But it
Yeah.
was. And so George O'Neill then was very much English,
Yeah.
English-speaking students. But George O'Neill was the principal when we first came here.
Yeah.
And I don't know when it was the name was changed. I've forgotten now. But the school was big. And Gwen and I had 3B. There was a grade 3A class and a grade 3B. What did you have?
I had grade 4, 17 in the basement. I had a little room in the basement, and I was the last one to arrive to pick my class because everybody else had come in late August and I was coming the last one. So I got the class. It seemed that no one wanted, and it was the best class. I still remember every child. They were really, really good kids. Loved every one of them. There was a few little characters in there that I dealt with. Yeah, really nice class.
Yeah. And mine was upstairs. I was fortunate. I was right on the end. You could look out both ways upstairs. And I still shudder when I think that they shut all the windows up there except for a few, because we learned so much looking out the windows over the town in those days. There was so much to see, so much activity, and that was even before the fire hall was built. Across the road you could see downtown, and the school was big. I'm sure there was like 250 students at least in the school in those days. But lots of activities and lots of things outside. And Gwen and I both had things to learn because we did not come from this type of environment.
And I'll tell you what I learned very fast, talking of windows. So I was in the basement, so I lifted the basement windows up to get fresh air down into the basement. And one day, I always smelt this smell and I didn't know what it was. And I sort of checked outside the windows. I thought dogs were going outside the window and the smell was drifting in. You know, you think of everything. And finally one day somebody told me what it was. The mill in Red Rock smelled so badly, and when the wind blew this way, it came across and right down and it collected in the classroom. So you know what, we smelled that sort of sulphur smell from a paper mill. Yeah, so that was another eye-opener for me.
And I just remember not realizing the distance, I guess, that kids lived, and I remember being very picky about wearing shoes in the classroom, outdoor shoes, and I went one day and told this boy, walk home and get your indoor shoes. So off he went. Came back much later with his mother, and I found out that he lived out on the Cameron Falls Road. And he had walked all the way there to get his shoes. His mother was not very happy with me, but I learned pretty quick. Even asking children where they lived, and I had a student who lived in a house sort of in a back lane, and I couldn't figure out where the street was. So all kinds of little things that we had to learn.
That's funny because I was remembering one student, after my first year with grade 4, I had grade 1 and I was moved upstairs. And I know one of my grade 4 students commiserated with me. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Nyman, that you're going to grade 1 next year. He said, that's too bad. he said, well, he said, we can't all be smart. I guess he thought I was being demoted because I was being put down to grade 1. But talking of distances, I had a little boy when I had grade 1, and he came, the children there, he lived on Park Street, which is down where the Multiply or the plywood mill it used to be, and he walked up in, we had a lot of cold weather, like I think it was 40 below many nights in winter in those days. And the children didn't have the clothes we have today. No. They had their shoes on, and then they had little rubber boots they put on over their shoes. That's how they kept their feet warm. They were kind of waterproof. What do they call those?
Galoshes.
What they call? Okay, they do in England. I didn't think you did here.
Yes, yes.
So, and he came all the way, and when he got to me, walking from the plywood mill in at least 30 below, all the way up to the Nipigon Public School in grade 1, he would have been like 6 probably. He was completely frozen. His ears, he had frostbite and everything. It was really hard conditions, and a lot of the fathers were then working away in the bush. So town was run by the women a lot, I think, in the winter, because many of the men were working away for long periods of time, just like they go to the mines nowadays in 2019.
Yeah.
And so
come around.
Marty would have had no one to drive him. There would be not that many cars, and so he walked all the way up the hills in those days.
Yeah.
Long walk. It wasn't until years later when we got the school buses within the town picking children up, and that was when they opened Greenmantle School, and they went round to Greenmantle.
Yeah, lots of walking in those days.
Yeah.
And we did lots of walking with the kids. I mean, Gwen and I both went to the Bald Spot many times, so even the Bald Spot is a very old scenic place in
yeah,
town,
I remember
right?
taking my grade 4 class up to the Bald Spot. We
yeah.
accessed it from the Hogan Road.
Yeah, yeah.
And talking about languages, I was thinking when I first came, when I was told, you know, we don't really understand you English teachers, and I know why. Because when I first went down, I told you we used to cook our meals in the Nipigon Public School, Glenna and Rosalind, one of the other English teachers, and myself, 3 single girls, and we used to buy our groceries downtown and do joint meals, and Glenna always grabbed my dishes when I was still eating and washed them for me. She was always in a hurry to get going. However, when we went downtown, the biggest shock to me was I thought I'd come to Canada, an English-speaking country. How wrong I was. I didn't even know they had French, actually. But I knew very little about Canada. But when you went downtown, the next to the post office, there was the Hudson Bay Company. They had clothes and everything in the front, just like the bargain store. And in the back was the grocery store. And when you went in the back, there was the butcher. I think Cartwright was the butcher.
Yeah.
And then there was a till there when you came out of the groceries where you checked out all your groceries. And often, the only language you would hear at the till was Finnish. Everybody spoke Finnish here. And when I moved up on the highway, my neighbour only spoke Finnish. He spoke no English. And when I had my first child, he used to speak to Mr. Autio in English, and Mr. Autio used to speak to him in Finnish, and they got along just well. I still remember that.
Right. Every store pretty well had a clerk that spoke Finnish, because there were so many Finn ladies, as you say. They're the ones that did the family in the daytime, in the week, and so they were the ones that were in the store shopping. And I just remember most of the stores and businesses had a Finnish person, but going to Zechner's, that was when Zechner's is where the drugstore was, and because we went there to buy our meat. And I can remember Rosalind going there to buy fish or something, and then when we cooked it, it smelled up the whole school. And that was the day, and that was the days when the inspector came by, and everybody in class would sit up straight, and he would walk around the aisles, right, looking at everybody's notebook. And I think the teachers were more terrified of the inspector coming than the kids were, but it was quite a deal in those days.
Yes.
And obviously it was Mr. Steele.
Mr. Steele, and Mr. Steele complained about my teaching. I had my windows open, those darn windows, and they weren't all down at the same length. I had some up and some down, and they were supposed to be all neat, looking from the outside. So that was the big complaint he had about me as a teacher. I still remember that.
Yeah,
But-
lots of different things now have changed from the teaching, and even when you think of it's just mind-boggling to me now, but using the internet, and we were still using that old Gestetner. And copying, and the children wrote. I mean, I still have some books even for my kids when you filled the blackboard with writing and they copied it. They had to copy it into a notebook. There was no little books for them to just check off the answers, right? They had to do lots of writing in those days. And down at the corner by where Max and the cenotaph are was where the Flossie was the crossing guard. So there we've gone backwards now. The traffic is 10 times worse on that corner, and we don't have anybody to do the crossing guard. But Flossie was the old fellow who lived across in a little cabin on the river, and he was the crossing guard. Yeah, and everybody loved Flossie. He loved kids.
And not only did we have a Flossie for the crossing guard, but the top of the hill, kitty corner to the school, was a little store.
Yes, Mrs. Fobert's little
Mrs.
store.
Mrs. couldn't remember. So the kids, if they wanted to buy anything, they just had to run across the street. It was really handy there.
Yeah.
And of course, the hospital was the opposite way, right close to the school too. That's changed too.
Yeah, everything has changed now. But anyway, 60 years has gone by fast, Gwen.
Yeah, but remember when we first came, Nipigon was totally self-sufficient.
Yes.
It didn't need Thunder Bay for anything. We bought our TV from Mr. Fraser on Front Street. We bought our washing machine, our first washing machine. I think it was a Maytag from Mr. Usala. And he told me my name wasn't Nyman, it was Newman because he was Swedish or something. And all that language again. And we had a barber's. Not Sam, somebody before Sam, I guess.
Alan Hanula was a barber, and Jimmy Ring.
And Jimmy Ring, that's the name.
Yeah, was there. Yeah.
Right, and so we had the hairdresser, the barber.
Marshall Wells was the hardware store.
Oh, right.
And Beaver Lumber. Those were the places that, you're right, self-sufficient. That lots of jewelry stores downtown.
Oh, yes, we
restaurants.
Had Chris Jewelry, good jewelry store, right on, and very good.
Remember
really,
Shucksmith's?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then Cassidy's.
Yeah, and then Cassidy's later on, but lots of restaurants as well.
And the Liberty Cafe. Oh, the Liberty Cafe, I think that was the one where they had jukeboxes on the wall. You could put a quarter in, or a nickel, or a dime, or whatever it was. How much was it? Do you know?
No, you just put it in because you had coins in those days.
You know what? I think it was 10 cents. I know it wouldn't have been a quarter. That was half my salary. Yeah, 10 cents, and then it played all the popular tunes. It was really neat. You sat at the booths, and there you were in the jukebox playing.
Yeah. Downtown has certainly changed, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe not for the better, I don't know. I guess it is, but lots of memories from those days.